Hello Booktube, and welcome to my bookshelves. So today I'm going to do my January wrap-up. As you can see, I've still got a nasty scar there, still got a little bit of a black eye, but I'm getting better. If you haven't seen my previous videos, I went down with flu a few weeks ago. So January wasn't the best reading month because it was difficult to wear my glasses because I broke my nose as well, and it hurt to wear my glasses for a good week and a half, so I didn't get much reading done during that week. I mean, I wasn't in a fit state to read anyway, but it was annoying. So anyway, what did I read in January when I could? Well, I've got 5 books, although 3 of them are in one volume, and one of them is 4 long novellas. So I'm going to start with the 3 that were in one volume, and that is P.G. Wodehouse. Now, these are the first 3 novels or books that P.G. Wodehouse published. This is The Pot Hunters, The Prefect's Uncle, and Tales of St. Austin, which are short stories. So The Pot Hunters is the first ever P.G. Wodehouse book novel, and it was published in 1902, so just at the turn of the last century, so 1902, and these early books are all set in private school, St. Austin's, and the first one, The Pot Hunters, tells the story of the students, and their sports trophies have been stolen, and some of the students then try to investigate and find out where the trophies are, and it follows the students through their sports training. Starts off with a boxing tournament, and then it goes on to running, and there's cricket. Yeah, so it's very, very sports orientated, this school. And this is his debut novel, and it is everything you expect from a later P.G. Wodehouse. Sparkling dialogue, great characters, intriguing plot. It's a short book, it's only about 120 pages, so you can get through it really quickly. Yes, it is dated. Some of the language is incredibly dated. Very enjoyable read. If you don't like sports, then you probably won't enjoy these early books, because they are centered around the sporting achievements of the students. Very enjoyable first book. So the second book in this omnibus is The Prefect's Uncle. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first book. Again, it's set in private school, and this time it follows or focuses on cricket as the sport. In fact, there's one chapter of this. Again, it's a short book, but there's one chapter which is basically a cricket match commentary, and that's it, really. So if you don't like cricket or don't understand cricket, then you probably won't get much from this book. It tells the story of one of the prefects and his uncle, who also happens to be about the same age as him, turns up at the school, and the uncle then steals some money, and the prefect has to chase after him. Thus, he misses the cricket match, and that's about it, really. It's not as good as the first one, and if you don't like cricket, then you won't enjoy this book. But a good short read. I mean, I read this on my sickbed, so I probably didn't give it as much focus as I should have. But a good light read. And the third one published was the collection of short stories, Tales of St. Austin's, and it's set again at the school, and it's just a collection of short stories, character studies. Some of the stories are entertaining. A lot of them, yeah, I didn't really enjoy. There's a few sort of essays on school life in there as well, and yeah, a little bit too dated. Focuses again on sports, but it also throws in the school life, the exams, and sort of classics, and the teachers, and a lot of the references are outdated now. And these are sort of just short little character studies, really, and so interesting. But I wouldn't recommend starting sort of PG Wodehouse with these. The first book, The Pot Hunters, is really good. The second two, not quite as good, but entertaining. So that was my PG Wodehouse read for January. I'm currently on the second omnibus. I'll do that in February. What else did I read? So I read a book called The Other Mrs. Walker. And this book made me quite cross, really. I enjoyed the book. It had a good story, and good writing, and good characters. And it was a good read. I think I gave it 3 stars. And it is set in Scotland, modern day, and a woman returns to Scotland to her mother's after some event happened in her past in London, meaning she had to move back to Scotland, and she joins a charity group which helps find the relatives of people who have died alone in Scotland when there's no known relatives around. And so she is given a case, a woman who has died on her own in Edinburgh, and she investigates this woman's life to find out if there's any next of kin. Interspersed with this story, we jump forward and back in time. Not forward, because that would be silly. We jump back in time. So we go back to the 1920s, and we follow this family in London. And then a few chapters later, it will jump forward to 1940. We see where this family is now, and then it may jump back again to 1937, and then it will jump forward to the 1960s, and so forth and so on. And you get a picture of this family living in London and the trials of that family. And then it is sort of linked to this modern day story in Scotland, and the family are connected in some way. So that's a story. Quite interesting. But the book and the blurb were published and marketed, and the tagline was a detective story with no detective. And I picked the book up and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And the blurb talks about this woman who died alone in a flat, but it's not a detective story. I mean, yes, there is a woman who has died, but there's no suspicious circumstances. It is not, there are no suspects, there's no clues, there's no twists. It is just a woman who has died on her own in Edinburgh. So there is no detective story. And if it was a detective story, then there is a detective, because there is a woman investigating this woman's life. So a detective story with no detective is a misleading tagline. And I went into the book with the wrong mindset, because I was expecting a detective story, a crime, and there wasn't. And it took me sort of a good third of the book to realise that this was not what I thought I was going to be reading. It was a good book, but just not what I thought. So yeah, so I liked the book. I didn't like the reason why I read the book, if that makes any sense. And the 5th book I read, and while I was recovering, was What Else Do You Need While You're Recovering from the Flu? Stephen King. And this was 4 Past Midnight, a collection of 4 novellas. Now, when I say novella, the first one is 300 pages, which in anyone else's world would be a novel, but in Stephen King's world, that is a novella. So this is 4 stories, and the first one is called The Langoliers, and it was brilliant. This is the story of a group of airplane passengers who wake up mid-flight and find everyone has disappeared from the plane, including the pilot. Luckily, one of the people who have woken up is a pilot, and so they manage to land the plane, and they get to an airport and find that everyone in the world, or everyone in the airport, has disappeared. The whole world is gone, basically. There's no people left whatsoever. And it is a tense Twilight Zone-esque fantasy, sci-fi, throw in a psycho killer and a blind girl, and you got a perfect Stephen King thriller. And it was, a very good read. I recommend reading that one alone. It's called The Langoliers. I think there was a film made of it as well. But The Langoliers. The second one is called Secret Window, Secret Garden. And this is a typical Stephen King story. A struggling writer is approached and by a strange man who accuses him of plagiarism. And yes, it is a good story, but it is one that Stephen King has done lots of times before. Most recently, before this was published, was The Dark Half, in which a struggling writer's alter ego comes to life and starts killing people. If you think of Misery, a writer's in a crash and is bedbound and looked after by his #1 fan. Going all the way back to The Shining. So he has written about writers and their struggles many times before, and better than this one. Yeah, an entertaining read, but nothing new from Stephen King there. The third one was possibly the scariest one, and that is The Library Policeman. Now, bearing in mind I was reading this from a library book and it was due back within a week, The Library Policeman was, not a good read. It was a brilliant read, but it was scary. So this is a story of a man who borrows a couple of books from a library and then loses them, and the librarian warns him that if he doesn't bring the books back on time, she will send the library policeman to come and get him. And she does. Again, it's a novella, but it's like almost 300 pages. So it's a long short story. But yeah, The Library Policeman, really good. Fourth one is called The Sundog. And yes, I enjoyed it, but I don't think the writing or story was as strong as the previous ones. This tells a story of a boy who gets a Polaroid camera for his birthday and he takes a picture of his family, but what comes out on the Polaroid is a picture of a dog. And you just get pictures of this dog. And then they suddenly realise that the pictures are slowly moving. So if you flick through them like a little flicker book, you can see the dog sort of walking around. And then the dog starts to turn to face the camera, and you realise it's not a nice dog, and it doesn't like having its picture taken, and it starts coming towards the camera. So every time you take a picture, the dog is a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. Yeah, and it's a good creepy story. I think it's dragged out a little bit too long. Again, it's about 200 pages. Could have been cut down by 50 pages, I think. So of the 4, I think I would say that The Langoliers was my favourite, followed very closely by The Library Policeman. Secret Window, Secret Garden was third, and The Sundog I liked, but not as much as the previous ones, is in 4th place. So that is my wrap-up for January. Not bad, considering I was out of action for a week, 10 days with the flu. So let me know if you've read any of those, or if you want to read any of those. Do you like P.G. Wodehouse? Do you like Stephen King? What do you think about how books are marketed and the taglines that they use on books? Let me know down in the comments below. You can also follow me on Twitter as well. And I'll see you again in my next video. Thank you for watching.